What happens when you let Jesus Christ take control of your life and guide you? What if the real reason you feel so tired is not your life, but the fact that you are trying to control all of it? You pray, you believe in God, you try to do the right thing, but deep inside, there is this constant pressure, this weight that never seems to leave. Your mind keeps running, trying to solve, fix, predict, avoid. Even when you say you trust God, something in you refuses to let go. And that quiet tension follows you everywhere, in your decisions, in your relationships, in your future. You wake up already thinking about what could go wrong. You go to sleep, still trying to figure things out. And in between, you carry responsibilities that feel heavier than you can explain. But here is the question that changes everything. What if God never asked you to carry this? What if the life you are trying to manage was never meant to be managed by you alone? Scripture says to trust in the Lord with all your heart and not lean on your own understanding. But if we are honest, most of us still lean. We still hold on. We still try to be in control, just in case. And that is where the exhaustion begins, because you can believe in Jesus and still live like everything depends on you. But when you stop trying to lead your own life, something shifts. Not outside first, but inside. The noise starts to quiet down. The pressure begins to lift. And for the first time in a long time, you can breathe again. If this is you, listen carefully. This might be the moment where everything begins to change. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix. You can rest your body, but your mind keeps moving, your heart keeps carrying, and something inside you never fully relaxes. It is subtle, almost invisible, but it is always there. And most people do not even realize what is causing it. It is the burden of trying to be your own guide. At first, it feels like responsibility. You tell yourself that you are just being careful, just being wise, just doing what needs to be done. You think that if you stay alert, if you think ahead, if you plan enough, you can protect your life from going wrong. But over time, that constant need to manage everything begins to take something from you. Every decision starts to feel heavy. Even small choices carry pressure, because deep down, you feel like everything depends on you getting it right. You replay conversations in your mind, you question your steps, you try to predict outcomes before they happen. And when things do not go as expected, you take it personally, as if you failed at something you were never meant to control in the first place. This is where the weight grows quietly. You begin to carry your future like it is your responsibility to secure it. You carry other people's expectations. You carry the fear of making the wrong move. You carry the need to understand everything before you act. And without noticing, your peace becomes tied to your ability to manage life. But that is not how you were created to live. There is a difference between being responsible and being in control of everything. Responsibility is healthy, but control becomes a burden when it replaces trust. And many believers live in this tension. They love God, they believe in Him, but they still feel like they need to hold everything together on their own. You pray, but your mind keeps trying to solve. You trust, but only up to a certain point. You say that God is in control, but inside, you are still holding the steering wheel, just in case. And that just in case is what drains you. Because trying to be your own guide means you never fully rest. You are always thinking, always calculating, always preparing for what could go wrong. Even in moments that should feel peaceful, there is a quiet tension running underneath. Scripture gives a completely different picture. It tells us not to lean on our own understanding, not because thinking is wrong, but because your understanding was never meant to carry the weight of your entire life. There are things you cannot see, outcomes you cannot control, paths you cannot fully understand. And when you try to take responsibility for all of that, your soul begins to feel overwhelmed. Jesus did not invite you to figure everything out. He invited you to follow Him. There is something deeply freeing in that truth. Following means you are not responsible for the entire path. Following means you do not need to see the whole picture. Following means that someone else is leading, and your role is to stay close. But being your own guide keeps you distant from that kind of peace. It keeps you focused on yourself, on your ability, on your understanding. And slowly, it creates a life where everything feels like pressure. You wake up already thinking about what needs to be solved. You carry decisions throughout the day, like weights on your shoulders. And even when nothing is wrong, you feel like something could go wrong at any moment. That is not peace, that is survival mode. And maybe this is where something begins to shift for you. Not because everything around you changes, but because you start to recognize what you have been carrying. You begin to see that this constant pressure, this mental exhaustion, this emotional weight is not coming from God. God does not lead through pressure. He leads through peace. And if your life feels like constant pressure, maybe it is not because you are failing. Maybe it is because you have been trying to lead yourself in places where only God was meant to lead you. That realization can feel uncomfortable, but it is also the beginning of freedom. Because if you were never meant to carry this burden, then you are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to stop trying to control everything. You are allowed to not have all the answers. You are allowed to trust that God sees what you cannot see and understands what you cannot understand. And the moment you begin to consider that, something softens inside you. The pressure loosens. The constant need to figure everything out begins to fade. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Not a life without responsibility, but a life without that crushing weight. Not a life without decisions, but a life where you are no longer alone in them. Because maybe the life you have been trying to manage was never meant to be managed by you. There is a point where what you call faith no longer feels like rest. It starts to feel like pressure inside your own mind. You are still praying, still believing, still trying to trust God, but something is off. Instead of peace, there is noise. Instead of clarity, there is tension. And instead of rest, there is a constant mental effort that never seems to stop. You begin to think more than you pray. You analyze more than you surrender. You try to understand every detail, every possibility, every outcome. And without realizing it, your faith becomes something you carry in your thoughts instead of something you live from your spirit. It is not that you stopped believing. It is that you started carrying belief the wrong way. You tell yourself that you are being responsible, that you need to think things through, that you cannot just ignore reality. And that is true. But somewhere along the way, your thinking stopped serving your faith and started replacing your trust. You start waking up with questions already forming in your mind. What if this does not work? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I miss what God wants for me? And those questions do not stay small. They grow, they multiply, and they begin to dominate your inner world. Even when you pray, your mind keeps interrupting. You ask God for direction, but before you even finish, you are already trying to come up with answers. You ask for peace, but then you immediately go back to analyzing the situation from every possible angle. And this creates a quiet exhaustion that is hard to explain. Because from the outside, it looks like you are doing everything right. You believe, you care, you are engaged. But inside, you feel overwhelmed. This is what happens when faith becomes mental overload. You were never meant to carry your life through constant thinking. Your mind was not designed to hold the weight of your future. It was designed to respond to God, not replace Him. There is a difference between thinking with God and thinking instead of trusting Him. One brings clarity, the other brings confusion, and many people are stuck in that confusion without realizing it. They think they are being faithful, but they are actually trapped in a cycle of overthinking that keeps them distant from peace. Scripture says to trust with all your heart, not all your mind. That does not mean your mind has no place. But it does mean your mind is not the foundation of your peace. When your mind becomes the center, everything becomes unstable because your thoughts change constantly. One moment you feel confident, the next you feel uncertain. One moment you believe things will work out, the next you're imagining everything going wrong. And because your peace is tied to your thoughts, your emotions follow that same instability. That is why you feel tired, even when nothing physically demanding has happened. Your mind has been running all day, carrying scenarios, trying to control outcomes, attempting to solve what only God can handle. And the hardest part is that it feels necessary. It feels like if you stop thinking, something will go wrong. Like if you let your guard down, you will lose control. But that is the illusion. You are not in control because you think more. You are just more aware of how little control you actually have. And that awareness, without trust, creates anxiety. God never asked you to figure everything out before trusting Him. He asked you to trust Him even when you do not understand. That is where peace begins. Not when you have all the answers, but when you release the need to have them. There is a quiet moment that can happen inside you, where instead of chasing every thought, you step back. You stop feeding every question. You stop trying to solve everything at once, and you begin to shift your focus from your mind to His presence, from your analysis to His guidance, from your need to understand to your willingness to trust. And in that shift, something changes. The noise begins to slow down. The urgency starts to fade. And for the first time in a while, you feel a sense of space inside your own mind. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer trying to resolve everything on your own. This is where real faith begins to breathe again. Not as pressure, not as effort, but as surrender. And once you experience that, you start to realize something important. Maybe the problem was never your situation. Maybe the problem was the way you were carrying it. And if that is true, then there is a different way to walk through your life, a way that does not drain you but restores you, a way that does not depend on your constant thinking but on your connection with God. And that leads to a deeper question. If control and overthinking are not bringing you peace, then what are they actually doing to you? Control feels safe. That is why it is so hard to let go of it. It gives you the sense that you are doing something, that you are protecting yourself, that you are staying ahead of problems before they happen. It creates the impression that if you just try a little harder, think a little more, manage a little better, you can avoid pain, avoid mistakes, avoid uncertainty. But that sense of safety is not real. It is an illusion. Because no matter how much you try to control, there are still things you cannot predict. There are still outcomes you cannot guarantee. There are still moments that will unfold in ways you did not expect. And when those moments come, control does not protect your peace. It actually makes the impact heavier. Because when you believe you are in control, every unexpected situation feels like something went wrong because of you. You start to question yourself. You replay decisions. You carry guilt for things that were never fully yours to control. And slowly, control turns against you. What once felt like strength begins to feel like pressure. What once felt like responsibility begins to feel like fear. You start holding tighter, thinking that the solution is to try even more, to control even better, to stay even more alert. But the tighter you hold, the more your peace slips away. This is how control steals from you without you noticing. It does not come as something obviously harmful. It comes disguised as wisdom, as caution, as maturity. It convinces you that you are doing the right thing, but at the same time it keeps your mind restless and your heart tense. You may not even realize how much it is affecting you until you try to rest. Until you try to be still, and suddenly your mind fills with thoughts you cannot turn off, scenarios you feel the need to resolve, questions you feel the need to answer immediately. That is not peace. That is a mind trained to depend on control. And the deeper problem is not just the behavior. It is what control replaces. It replaces trust, because every time you choose control, even subtly, you are saying that your ability to manage is more reliable than God's ability to lead. You may not say it out loud, but your actions reflect it. You hold on because letting go feels too risky, but control is not removing risk. It is just transferring the weight onto you, and that weight is heavy. God never designed your heart to carry that level of responsibility. You were not created to sustain constant pressure, constant vigilance, constant mental effort. Your soul was designed for something different. It was designed for trust. Trust does not mean doing nothing. It means knowing that you are not alone in what you are doing. It means recognizing that there is a limit to what you can control and finding peace in the one who has no limits. Jesus offered a different way of living, a way where peace is not dependent on everything going right, but on being connected to Him, a way where your heart can rest even when your circumstances are not perfect. But control keeps you from entering that rest, because rest requires surrender. And surrender feels like losing control, even though it is actually where you regain your peace. There is a moment that many people resist, a moment where you realize that no amount of thinking, planning, or effort can guarantee the outcome you want. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can tighten your grip and carry more pressure, or you can release what was never fully yours to hold. That release is not weakness. It is alignment with how God designed your life to function. When you begin to let go of control, something unexpected happens. You do not become careless. You do not become passive. You become lighter. Your decisions are no longer driven by fear, but by trust. Your mind is no longer racing to solve everything, but learning to be still. Your heart is no longer carrying the weight of outcomes, but resting in God's guidance. And that changes everything. Because peace does not come from controlling your life. Peace comes from knowing that God is in control, and choosing to live like that is true. And if control has been stealing your peace, then maybe the next step is not to try harder. Maybe the next step is to let go. But that brings up something deeper, something most people do not stop to examine. If letting go brings peace, why is it so difficult to actually do it? There is a subtle difference that changes everything, and most people never notice it. It is the difference between following Jesus and delegating things to Him. At first, they seem the same. You pray, you ask for help, you bring your concerns to God, you believe He can act, you believe He cares. But deep inside, there is still a line you do not cross. You give Him parts of your life, but not the control of it. You involve Jesus, but you still lead. And that is where the tension remains. Delegating to Jesus sounds like trust, but it often keeps you in charge. You decide what to bring to Him. You decide when to involve Him. You decide how much control you are willing to release. And when things feel too important, too uncertain, or too personal, you take them back without even realizing it. You pray about a decision, but then you rely on your own understanding to finalize it. You ask for peace, but if you do not feel it immediately, you go back to trying to solve everything yourself. You say you trust God, but only within the limits that feel safe to you. That is not following. That is managing your life with occasional help from God. Following Jesus is different. Following means you are no longer the one setting the direction. It means you are not just asking God to bless your plans, but allowing Him to shape them. It means you are not just seeking answers, but surrendering your need to control the outcome. And that is where it becomes uncomfortable, because following requires trust at a deeper level. Not partial trust, not conditional trust, but a willingness to move even when you do not fully understand where you are going. This is where many people hesitate. They want God's guidance, but they also want clarity before they move. They want His direction, but they also want to feel secure in their own understanding. They want peace, but only if it comes with certainty. But Jesus never built His invitation around certainty. He built it around trust. When He called people to follow Him, He did not give them full explanations. He did not map out every step. He simply invited them to walk with Him. And those who accepted had to release their need to control the path. That same invitation still exists, but it challenges something deep inside you. It challenges your need to feel in control. It confronts the part of you that wants guarantees before surrender. It exposes the quiet fear that if you let go completely, things might not go the way you expect. So you stay in between, not fully in control, but not fully surrendered, not completely leading, but not fully following either. And that in-between space creates confusion, because you are trying to experience the peace of being led while still carrying the responsibility of leading yourself. And those two cannot coexist. Peace comes when your role is clear. Either you are in control or God is. Either you are leading your life or you are being led. Trying to do both will always create tension. This is why you can believe in Jesus and still feel overwhelmed. Because belief alone does not remove the weight. Surrender does. Following Jesus means you trust Him with direction, not just outcomes. It means you allow Him to interrupt your plans, to shift your perspective, to lead you in ways that do not always match your expectations. And that kind of trust is not built in a moment. It is built through small daily decisions, moments where you choose to pause instead of react, moments where you release the need to understand everything, moments where you move forward, not because you have all the answers, but because you trust the one who is leading you. And something begins to change when you live like that. The pressure to figure everything out starts to fade. The need to control every detail begins to loosen, and instead of constantly asking, "What should I do?" you begin to ask, "Where is God leading me right now?" That question shifts everything, because now your focus is not on managing life, but on staying connected to the one who holds it. And in that connection, there is guidance, not always loud, not always immediate, but steady. And for the first time, you begin to understand what it means to walk with God, instead of just talking about Him. But even with that understanding, there is still something that makes this difficult. Because letting Jesus lead sounds right, until it requires you to release what you have been holding on to for so long. And that leads to a deeper struggle that many people never admit. There is a part of you that wants to trust God completely. You feel it when you pray, when you hear truth, when something inside you says there must be a better way to live than this constant pressure. You want peace. You want to rest. You want to let go. But there is another part of you that resists. It does not speak loudly. It does not announce itself. It shows up quietly, in hesitation, in delay, in that subtle feeling that says, "Not yet, I still need to figure this out first." And that inner resistance is stronger than most people realize. Because letting go is not just a spiritual decision, it is an emotional one. It touches your fears, your past experiences, your need to feel safe. It exposes the part of you that learned at some point that if you do not stay in control, things can go wrong. So even when you hear that God is trustworthy, something inside you still asks, "But what if? What if I let go and things fall apart? What if I trust and it does not work out? What if I surrender and I lose something important?" Those questions are not always conscious, but they shape your behavior. They keep you holding on, even when holding on is what is hurting you. This is the struggle no one talks about. Because from the outside, surrender sounds simple. Just trust God. Just let go. Just have faith. But inside, it feels like stepping into the unknown without anything to hold on to. And that feels risky. Control, even when it is exhausting, feels familiar. It gives you something to do. It gives you the illusion that you are protecting yourself. It keeps you engaged, active, involved. Letting go, on the other hand, feels like vulnerability. It feels like releasing your grip and trusting something you cannot fully see. And that is where the resistance comes from. Not because you do not believe in God, but because part of you is still afraid to trust Him completely. Maybe because of past disappointments, maybe because things did not go the way you expected before, maybe because you have learned to rely on yourself for so long that the idea of not doing that anymore feels unnatural. So you stay in control, not because you want to, but because it feels safer than the unknown. But what feels safe is not always what brings peace. In fact, this resistance is often the very thing keeping you from experiencing the peace you are looking for. Because peace is not found in controlling everything. It is found in trusting God with what you cannot control. And that requires you to face something honestly. You cannot hold on and let go at the same time. At some point, there has to be a decision. Not a perfect decision, not a fearless decision, but a real one. A moment where you acknowledge that your way of carrying life is not working, and you become willing to try a different way. That moment is not always dramatic. It is often quiet. It happens in the middle of your thoughts, in the middle of your exhaustion, in the middle of realizing that no matter how much you try, you cannot create peace on your own. And in that realization, something begins to soften. You start to see that your resistance is not protecting you, it is keeping you stuck. You start to understand that letting go is not about losing control, but about releasing a burden that was never yours to carry. And slowly you begin to open, not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. You begin to tell God what you are really feeling, not just the polished version of faith, but the fear, the hesitation, the uncertainty. And instead of pretending to trust, you start asking Him to help you trust. That is where something real begins. Because God is not asking you to have perfect faith. He is inviting you into a real relationship, one where you can come as you are, even with your resistance, even with your doubts, even with your struggle to let go. And in that space, trust begins to grow, not forced, not rushed, but developed over time as you experience that God is not against you, not distant, not unreliable. He is present, He is patient, He is leading even when you are still learning to follow. And as that trust begins to form, the grip you have been holding onto starts to loosen. Not because you forced it, but because you are starting to see that you do not need it the way you thought you did. And that leads to a quiet but powerful shift. A moment where surrender stops feeling like a loss and starts feeling like relief. There is a moment that does not look dramatic from the outside, but inside it changes everything. It is not loud. It does not come with instant answers or visible signs. It happens quietly, almost gently, in the middle of your exhaustion, when something inside you stops resisting. It is the moment you realize you cannot keep living the same way, not because everything around you collapsed, but because something within you is tired of carrying what was never yours. Tired of thinking without rest. Tired of trying to control what you cannot control. Tired of holding tension in your heart all day long. And instead of pushing through again, instead of trying harder one more time, you pause. That pause is where the shift begins. It is not a perfect prayer. It is not a long explanation. It is something simple and honest. A quiet surrender that sounds like this inside your heart. I cannot do this on my own anymore. There is no performance in that moment. No need to impress God, just truth. And something happens when you reach that place of honesty. The pressure that has been building begins to release. Not all at once, but enough for you to feel the difference. enough for you to notice that you are no longer gripping everything as tightly as before. This is the beginning of surrender. Not forced, not emotional for a moment and gone the next day, but real. Rooted in the understanding that your way of carrying life is not sustainable, you begin to shift from trying to control everything to being willing to trust God with anything. And that changes how you see things. Situations that once felt urgent start to lose their intensity, not because they no longer matter, but because you are no longer carrying them alone. Your mind is not racing the same way. Your heart is not holding the same weight. There is space now. Space to breathe. Space to think without panic. Space to respond instead of react. And in that space, something new becomes possible. You begin to notice God differently. Not as someone distant that you call when things go wrong, but as someone present, guiding you in small, consistent ways. A sense of direction that does not come from overthinking, but from a quiet awareness. A peace that does not depend on having answers, but on knowing you are not alone. This is the shift most people are looking for, but few recognize. They expect something external. A clear sign, a sudden breakthrough, a visible change. But the first and most important change happens inside. It is the moment your heart releases the need to control. And once that happens, everything else begins to align differently. Your decisions become lighter. You are no longer choosing from fear, but from trust. You are no longer trying to predict every outcome, but learning to take one step at a time. You start to understand what it means to be led. Not perfectly, not without questions, but with a sense of peace that was not there before. This does not mean challenges disappear. It does not mean life becomes easy, but it does mean you are no longer carrying life in the same way. And that changes your experience completely. Because when the weight shifts from your shoulders to God's hands, your soul finally begins to rest. And in that rest, clarity starts to emerge. Not all at once, not in ways you can always explain, but enough to guide your next step. You begin to see that God does not rush you. He leads you. He does not overwhelm you with the entire path. He gives you what you need for now, and that is enough. The quiet shift teaches you something powerful. You do not need to have everything figured out to move forward. You just need to stop carrying everything as if it depends on you. And when that truth settles inside you, something changes in the way you walk through life. You are no longer forcing your way forward. You are learning to follow. And that leads to a new kind of experience, one that feels unfamiliar at first, but deeply right. Because when you stop forcing things to happen, something else begins to take place. There is a subtle pressure that follows you when you are used to forcing things. It does not always look intense, but it is always present. It shows up in the need to make things happen, to push outcomes, to ensure that life moves in the direction you think it should go. You feel it when you cannot relax until something is resolved. When you keep revisiting the same situation, trying to find a better answer. When you believe that if you do not act, decide, or intervene, everything might stay stuck or fall apart. Forcing feels like progress, but it often comes from fear. Fear of missing the right moment, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of being left behind. And that fear creates urgency, an internal pressure that pushes you to act before you are at peace. But that kind of movement is heavy, because when you force your way through life, you are constantly swimming against something. You are trying to open doors with effort instead of recognizing which doors God is actually opening. You are trying to create clarity instead of receiving it. And over time, that becomes exhausting. There is a different way to move, but it requires a shift that feels uncomfortable at first. It requires you to stop forcing, not to become passive, not to stop caring, but to release the urgency that comes from fear. To stop trying to control timing, outcomes, and direction all at once. When you stop forcing, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice what God is already doing. Instead of trying to push your way forward, you start paying attention. You become aware of the small, quiet ways God is guiding you. A sense of peace about a decision. A lack of peace about something you were trying to convince yourself was right. A door that opens without struggle. A path that becomes clearer without pressure. These are not accidents. This is what it looks like when God leads, but you cannot recognize His leading when your life is driven by force, because force is loud, urgent, and demanding. God's guidance is often quiet, steady, and patient. And if you are always rushing, you will miss it. This is why so many people feel confused about direction, not because God is silent, but because their lives are too filled with pressure to hear Him clearly. When you begin to slow down internally, even if your life is still active, your awareness changes. You start to notice what brings peace and what brings tension. You begin to discern what feels aligned and what feels forced. And that discernment becomes a form of guidance. Because God often leads through peace, not pressure. That does not mean everything feels easy. It means that even when something is challenging, there is a sense of rightness, a quiet stability inside you that does not come from your own understanding. And that is very different from forcing. Forcing creates anxiety. Leading creates peace. Forcing makes you feel like everything depends on you. Being led reminds you that you are not alone in the process. As you begin to live this way, your relationship with decisions changes. You are no longer trying to control every outcome. You are learning to take one step at a time, trusting that God will guide the next one. You are no longer driven by urgency, but by alignment, and something inside you starts to settle. The constant need to act begins to fade. The fear of missing out loses its grip. The pressure to get everything right is replaced by a deeper trust that God is able to direct your path even when you do not see the full picture. This does not make you passive. It makes you attentive. You still move. You still decide. You still act. But you are no longer forcing your will onto every situation. You are responding to something greater than yourself. And that brings a kind of peace that is hard to explain until you experience it. A peace that remains even when things are not fully resolved. A confidence that does not come from knowing everything, but from trusting the one who does. This is where your life begins to feel different. Not because everything changes instantly, but because you are no longer carrying the same internal pressure. You are no longer trying to lead your life by force. You are allowing yourself to be led. And as that becomes your way of living, something deeper begins to transform. Because when you stop forcing and start following, it does not just change your decisions, it begins to change who you see yourself as. Something begins to change in the way you see yourself when you are no longer trying to control everything. It is not just your decisions that feel different, it is your identity. For a long time, you may have defined yourself by how well you could manage life, by how strong you were, how much you could handle, how capable you were of solving problems and holding things together. You became the one who figures things out, the one who carries responsibility, the one who does not fall apart. And without realizing it, that became who you believed you had to be. But that identity comes with pressure, because if you are the one who must hold everything together, then there is no room to rest, no room to not know, no room to be weak, uncertain, or dependent. You have to stay strong, stay alert, stay in control, and that is exhausting. When you begin to let Jesus lead your life, that identity starts to shift. Not all at once, but gradually, as you experience what it means to not carry everything alone. You begin to see that your value is not in how much you can control, but in who you belong to. You are no longer just someone trying to manage life. You are someone being led. And that changes how you relate to everything. You are no longer defined by pressure, but by trust. You are no longer driven by fear of getting things wrong, but by a growing confidence that God is guiding you even when you do not see the full path. This does not make you careless, it makes you secure, because your identity is no longer built on your performance, but on your relationship with God. You start to realize that you do not need to prove anything by carrying more than you should. You do not need to validate your strength by holding everything together. You do not need to define yourself by your ability to control outcomes. You can be at peace even when you do not have all the answers. That is new, because before, not knowing felt like weakness. Now it feels like space for God to move. Before, uncertainty created anxiety. Now it becomes an opportunity to trust. Before, your sense of stability came from your own understanding. Now it comes from knowing that God is steady, even when you are not. And that changes how you walk through life. You stop reacting from fear. You stop making decisions just to relieve pressure. You stop chasing control as a way to feel safe. Instead, you begin to move from a place of trust, a quiet confidence that does not need to be loud, a peace that does not depend on everything being perfect, a stability that comes from knowing you are not navigating life alone. This identity is not built overnight. It is formed through experience. Every time you choose to trust instead of control, something in you shifts. Every time you release what you cannot carry, you reinforce a new way of living. Every time you see God guide you, even in small ways, your confidence in Him grows. And slowly, your identity becomes rooted in that relationship. You are no longer the source of your own direction. You are someone who follows. You are someone who is guided. You are someone who does not need to carry everything to be okay. And that brings a deep sense of relief, because for the first time, you are not trying to be everything for yourself. You are allowing God to be who He has always been, your guide, your provider, your source of peace. And in that shift, something else begins to take shape. Because identity does not just affect how you see yourself, it affects how you live every single day. And when your identity changes, your daily life cannot stay the same. The real test of surrender is not what you feel in a moment of reflection. It is how you live when the day begins, when responsibilities return, when decisions come back, when life continues moving. Because it is one thing to release everything in a quiet moment with God. It is another thing to wake up the next day and not pick it all back up again. This is where many people struggle. They experience peace for a moment, but then the routine comes back. Messages, responsibilities, expectations, decisions, and without noticing, they return to the same pattern of carrying everything again. Not because they want to, but because it has become natural. Living daily without carrying everything requires a new awareness. It requires you to recognize when you are picking up what you already surrendered. It shows up in small moments. When a situation arises and your mind immediately starts racing, trying to solve everything at once. When something uncertain happens and you feel that familiar pressure building again. When you catch yourself trying to control outcomes instead of trusting God with them. Those are the moments where your new way of living is formed, not in big decisions, but in daily responses. You begin to pause instead of react. You begin to notice what you are feeling instead of being driven by it. You begin to ask yourself a simple question: am I carrying something right now that I already gave to God? And that question brings you back to trust, back to surrender, back to the awareness that you are not alone in what you are facing. This does not mean you ignore your responsibilities. It means you approach them differently. You still make decisions, but without the weight of needing to control every outcome. You still take action, but without the pressure of needing to guarantee results. You still care, but without allowing fear to lead your choices. That difference changes everything, because now your actions are not driven by anxiety, but by trust. Your mind is no longer overloaded with possibilities. It becomes quieter, more focused, more present. You are no longer living ahead of yourself, trying to solve tomorrow before it arrives. You are living one step at a time, and there is a peace in that rhythm. A peace that does not come from everything being perfect, but from knowing you are not carrying everything alone. You begin to experience what it means to rely on God in real time. Not just in prayer, but in your thoughts, in your decisions, in your reactions. When something unexpected happens, instead of immediately trying to control it, you bring it to God. When uncertainty shows up, instead of spiraling into overthinking, you pause and trust that He is already aware, already present, already working. This becomes your new pattern, not perfect, not without moments of struggle, but different. Because even when you catch yourself slipping back into old habits, you now recognize it. And recognition allows you to return to peace, return to trust, return to the understanding that you do not need to carry what God has already taken responsibility for. And over time, this becomes natural. You begin to live lighter, not because life has fewer challenges, but because you are no longer holding them the same way. You move through your days with a different posture, less pressure, less urgency, less fear, more trust, more awareness, more peace, and that peace becomes something steady, not dependent on circumstances, not easily shaken, but rooted in your relationship with God. You begin to understand that surrender is not a one-time act. It is a daily way of living, a continuous choice to release what you cannot control and trust the one who can. And as you live this way, something beautiful begins to grow inside you, a deeper connection with God, a stronger sense of peace, a life that no longer feels like a burden to carry, but a journey to walk. And in that place, your heart becomes ready for something even deeper, not just to trust God, but to fully give everything to Him. Right now, do not rush. Stay here for a moment. Let everything slow down inside you. You do not need to think about what comes next. You do not need to solve anything. Just be present. Take a breath, and if you can, close your eyes. Jesus, I come before you tired of carrying what was never mine. Tired of trying to control what I cannot control. Tired of thinking, planning, and holding everything together as if it all depends on me. You see my heart. You see the weight I have been carrying, the silent pressure, the hidden fears, the constant need to figure everything out. And today, I admit that I cannot do this on my own anymore. I release it to you. Every worry I have been holding on to, I place it in your hands. Every situation I have been trying to control, I surrender it to your authority. Every fear about the future, every doubt, every unanswered question, I give it to you right now. Teach me to trust you, even when I do not understand. Break the need inside me to control everything. Quiet the voice that tells me I have to carry it all. Remove the pressure that has been stealing my peace and fill that space with your presence. Jesus, lead me, not just in the big decisions, but in the small daily moments. Guide my thoughts when my mind starts to race. Guide my heart when fear tries to take over. Guide my steps when I do not know what to do. Help me to recognize your voice, even when it is quiet. Help me to follow you, even when the path is not fully clear. I choose to trust you, not because I have all the answers, but because you are faithful. Not because everything makes sense, but because you are in control. Not because I feel strong, but because you are my strength. Today, I let go. I let go of the pressure. I let go of the fear. I let go of the need to understand everything. And I receive your peace, the kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances, the kind of peace that comes from knowing that you are with me. From this moment forward, I will not carry what you have already taken. I will not hold on to what I have already surrendered. When the weight tries to return, remind me that it no longer belongs to me. I belong to you. My life is in your hands. My future is in your hands. My path is in your hands, and I trust you to lead me. If this prayer spoke to your heart, stay connected. This is not just a moment, it is the beginning of a new way of living, a life led by peace, guided by God, and free from the weight you were never meant to carry. Subscribe to this prayer channel and continue walking this journey. You do not have to do this alone.